Great evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special Google Hangout on air with Buchanan Success Coaching. We've got John Buchanan who will be leading us through today on coaching, managing and leading your high-performance sales teams to even higher performance. Hello, John. How are you this evening?
Good evening, Emma. How are you going?
Great, thank you. We have a great panel assembled tonight, don't we?
We do. There's some very, very interesting characters out there, and hopefully the audience gets an opportunity to ask a question because one or two of them can speak a little bit.
Excellent. Well, from the green room they can speak a little bit, so I'm looking forward to tonight. Now, if you do have a question, please tweet it through with hashtag #AskJohnBuchanan, and when it's appropriate I will interrupt the panel, if I can, and ask your question. Now, if you would like to engage even further with John, if you click the little button within this platform, the Google Hangout, and on the right-hand side you will see a download button for the top 12 list on how to produce winning teams, which is a great read and something that you're very proud of, aren't you, John?
Yes, look, hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk a little bit about those sorts of things this evening, but yeah, we're obviously all about producing very, very successful teams, and I think within that little bit of a read there's some ideas that can give people a little bit of food for thought.
Excellent. Now, we hosted a Google Hangout not so long ago, about 2 months ago, John. What's been happening in your world since that event?
Well, look, plenty of things. I've been doing my usual corporate work, a little bit in the legal field, heading up to Gladstone soon to do some work with the Gladstone Area Water Board up there, but also being involved in a couple of sporting reviews, one with Athletics Australia, which is pretty interesting, and going in behind the scenes of the NRL referees, which is really just an eye-opening insight.
Fantastic, very good. Always interested in what you're up to. You certainly do a wide variety of work. Now, we're going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their history with you, John. First of all, I'll ask Oscar, would you mind unmuting yourself, please, and introducing yourself?
Thanks, Emma. Good evening. My name's Oscar Trimboli, and after 30 years in corporate world, particularly technology and marketing, I've put up my own shingle in the coaching sphere as well, so very much focused on the corporate environment, and got introduced to John through a previous Google Hangout, and I believe that all coaches can learn from other disciplines, so made a point of reading John's book and understanding his philosophy on coaching and how it applies in my practice. So it's been a great leader and very inspiring with his humility in his approach.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we're looking forward to hearing your points of view on some of the topics we're going to be discussing. Now, I'll ask Paul Jackson to unmute himself. Paul, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I'll introduce myself. I've known John since about 20 years when I came up to play cricket for Queensland. John became the coach in 1995, and in that first season he became the winning premiership coach for the Queensland team, the first time in 69 years. So I was very fortunate to see John's coaching techniques at first hand for about 7 years, and also be involved as a selector of the Queensland team. John and I have kept in contact since that time, and he's helped me a little bit around my career with regards to banking. I've been in banking for 30 plus years and actually have been involved in the sales side of banking, where I look after currently a set of global resource companies for Westpac Bank. So, John and I have regular correspondence on the aspects of high-performing teams and how to bring the best out of you.
Fantastic. Well, we're definitely looking forward to hearing your perspective tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul.
Thank you, Emma.
Excellent. Now we're going to go across to Jeff now. Jeff Foley, would you mind introducing yourself, please? You'll just need to unmute yourself.
That's it. Can you hear me?
There we go. Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Jeff Foley. I first came in contact with John in the early 1990s when I started playing for University Cricket Club. In that first year he came across, so I got a good first-hand glimpse of his techniques, and those techniques, I used them to become successful very quickly. And then post that with the Queensland team, I played probably throughout the 90s whilst John was the coach for the majority of that time. So again, like Paul, to see, you know, John at first hand and the things he did to take us to another level. Since I've retired from cricket, I've become involved in the broking world, now a senior financial advisor for Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, which is probably, it is the largest wealth management firm in the world. So that's my status. So yeah, there you go.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight, Jeff. We appreciate it. Now, Adam, I will let you introduce yourself. This is Adam Dale, everyone. If you could unmute yourself and let us know who you are and what you do.
Hi, guys. Adam's my name. I've known John since the mid-90s when he first became coach of the Queensland side, and really from a personal point of view changed my world around in regards to my cricket and all the things that went with that. So I owe a lot to John, and not only as a career coach, he's become a great friend and someone that since till now has been really important in what I do from day to day, and we talk regularly, as Jacko and Jeff said. So what I do now is I work for a manufacturer of furniture, a company called HDL. We're probably the largest manufacturer of furniture globally of sofas, and I look after sales and marketing in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm fortunate, got a good job, but certainly all the way through my cricket time of 10 years, when John was coaching Queensland, he then became coach of Australia, and I was lucky enough to be at the start of John's career coaching for Australia in the team at that point. So got to see him at both levels, and very consistent, and certainly helps a lot of people.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and we're looking forward to getting all your perspectives. Now, just a reminder, if anyone does want to ask John Buchanan a question, you can tweet it with the hashtag AskJohnBuchanan on Twitter. So I've got it waiting here for you. Now, I'm going to throw back to Jeff right now. Jeff, if you could unmute yourself. From your history with John, what was the biggest lesson you learnt from him? And if you could ask a question of him about his leadership style now, what would it be?
My biggest lesson, yeah, I think it was about teaching me the value of preparation, and through good preparation, you didn't really have to worry about the result. The result took care of itself, and the preparation might be the mental side, the physical side, the strategic side was really important, and he brought that to light. So it got to the point where, you know, the result in some instances didn't really didn't matter, because you know, if you prepared well, 9 times out of 10 the result took care of itself, and if it didn't, it was usually out of your control. So it took my focus away from that and just, you know, focus purely on my preparation. So yeah.
Excellent. And if you could ask a question of John?
Ooh, okay. Well, I suppose from a coaching perspective, what is probably the most important component of coaching to getting the best out of your cricket, or out of your side, or your team?
John, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay, I better just make sure I'm unmuted. I think I am.
Yes, you're good to go.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, and I see Greg's just joined us, so we'll have to fill him in on that.
Good evening, Greg.
Good to be with you. Sorry for my delay. I was just a few technical issues. I have no idea what it is, but I'm here now, so good to be with you.
Excellent. Good to see you too. We'll get you to introduce yourself just after John answers this question.
So look, I think one of the cornerstones of coaching is still always to understand yourself. Really, just try to work out who you are, what your key values are, what your key principles are, what your cornerstones are. Because ultimately, coaching to me is simply like parenting, and in the end, that's all about relationships. It's just about a relationship between yourself and either your child or yourself, your staff member, yourself and your athlete. And somewhere in those introductions, somebody mentioned the word consistency. And I really think from an athlete's point of view or a staff member's point of view, what they want from their coach or their manager or their leader is just that, some consistency. And that's consistency in those messages, in what you stand for, your values, your philosophies, etc. You may choose to vary how you want to get that message across, but the message is still the same, so it's a consistent message. And I think that really is certainly able to be consistent if the coach, the manager, the leader really understands who they are and doesn't compromise that. You know, it's so important for that leader, manager, coach to be the same person in a sense day in, day out. I don't think those who work with leaders, coaches, managers, etc., going back to the parent example, they don't want you to be Mr. Jekyll one day and Mr. Hyde another day. I think it's too difficult. So it's about relationships, therefore it's about consistently delivering your values, and to do that you need to understand what they are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, John. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes, no, that's great.
Excellent. Now, Oscar, you joined this inner circle by writing a brilliant article regarding the last Google Hangout that we did. Can you tell us a little bit about what you took out of that Google Hangout? And if you have a question for John, you can ask it now.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, I'm someone who learns best by writing, so that's one of the things I did during the last webinar, to try and capture my thoughts and reinforce the learning. Yeah, just if you want to look at it, have a search by John Buchanan and Oscar Trimboli, you'll find it. I think my biggest takeaway was about mental stamina, and John talked about the impact of mental stamina and the ability to stay focused in that very moment of executing the task, and then breaking out of that, being present in what you do next, and then getting focused back on the task again. So this concept of switching in and switching out, and on really important tasks, to be very, very focused at the point of execution, was something that really landed with me, both in my own practice, but also in the way I've seen successful outcomes for me in the past, and not necessarily in a corporate setting, but in running marathons myself personally. I've found that just committing to the program and just doing whatever you're supposed to do that day and doing it really, really well, rather than getting fixated on what the marathon looks like, really came home with the mental stamina. So my question, John, is in the last Hangout you mentioned that leaders should be invisible. They need to be working above and beyond the team, and their role is to infuse and not to invoke, meaning enforcing a standard. So it's awesome. It sounds like this Zen state of leadership. But for the rest of us mere mortals, one of the things I struggled with in the past and have seen with my own clients is making that judgment call about when you actually become visible as a leader, when standards do need to be enforced. How do you make that judgment call about when to be visible and when to stay back?
Brilliant question. I'll hand that straight over to John.
What, you don't want to have a crack, Emma?
Go for it.
Look, yeah, terrific, Oscar, and great to have you on board. And also, Oscar's written a white paper looking at sport in the corporate world and how the two can intertwine, and look forward to that one coming out quite soon, and a good read. But look, I think again one of the keys to all that is certainly about your staff or your athletes. So for the coach to be invisible, if you like, that means the coach makes himself or herself redundant. To do that, again, it's just like parenting. Our job as parents is to enable our children to grow. to learn about the world, to fall over and make errors and so on, and get up again and learn from those, and learn from the experiences of being successful at the same stage. So what we have with our children, though, of course, is that we put them in a little paddock initially and with high fences, because we want to protect them, we want to keep them secure. But as we begin to understand that they know a little bit more about the world, and they can venture out into that world, and they can be a little bit safe in possibly making some good decisions, then we can put them into a bigger paddock, or we can actually reduce the height of the fences. So that analogy is the same with, I think, staff for athletes. It's so important that we really try to get the athlete, the staff member, to be their own best coach. So from a sporting sense, as Jeff was saying there before, and Jacko and Adam, in a sporting sense, there's a technical side of the game, but that's the same in the corporate world. There's a whole lot of technical skills that you need to have to actually do your job. Physically, obviously, sport demands a physical skill level, and again, in some occupations that's required too. Even sitting at a desk, like Rowley there, a lawyer day in, day out, it does require some physical stamina to be able to do that, to be able to go to the coffee machine and come back again, and then sit down. But there is a physical component to every job. Then, of course, there is the mental one, which you mentioned, just that mental toughness, that ability to be in the moment and to understand how you get there, the routines of getting there, and then the routine of actually switching off, so that you don't have to do this thing called concentration. Concentration is one of those broad terms that encompasses many things, but ultimately what we want to be able to do is switch in when we need to and switch off when we don't need to be there. And then tactically, that's all about the options that you have, the smorgasbord of options that you have. So if you're in the moment, meaning your mind's clear, then you'll make a good decision about what option is available to you. So those sort of things, I think, are what we strive for as coaches, to ensure that the athlete, staff member, is their own best coach. Therefore, we can stand back. Or what we do then is, in an environment, we create more challenges, we create more stimulation. And so, in other words, it's that approach about never being satisfied. So no matter how good the athletes are, and we've got 4 incredible former athletes, former sporting athletes here, now incredible business athletes, it is about placing them in environments that are constantly going to challenge their existing skills, so that there is this Kaizen, if you like, the improvement all the time. When you need to be visible is when you detect that maybe something is not quite working. Now, that could be with the individual, or it could be with the environment / culture / team environment. And maybe that's when it's time to re-intervene, maybe reinforce some certain principles that have sort of been shortcut in some way, shape or form, or been overlooked or forgotten. And so the coach's role then is to make sure that they come in and just straighten up some standards, make sure everybody again is on the same page, then retreat as quickly as they possibly can to allow the athletes, the business and the sporting athletes, to get on with what they do so very well, which is delivery of their skills.
It's Paul Jackson here, Emma. Could I just build on what John had to say? I actually saw this in first-hand practice. And John, this is a bit of a sporty, but we played Tasmania the last game of the season in 94-95 when Queensland won the Shield, and we had a day where that was probably due to forget. We got bowled out for about 240, and we were sitting in the change rooms, and collectively there was a dull in there. And John had the whole season kept a fairly low profile on where it was a pretty calm sort of guy. And we got out there. It's the last game of the season. Really, the season was almost hinging on this. Anyhow, there was a bit of John got up in front of the group, and I think as a leader you've got to know how to step in. And John got up in front of the group and sort of said, "I'm really disappointed with you guys this particular day." And he quizzed us pretty hard about how we were going, and it wasn't so much about how we played, but more about how our attitude was. And he really challenged us. And there was a gentleman who was a very experienced Australian cricketer there who quizzed John quite hard at it, and John answered him fairly strongly. And so long as, I think as a leader you can step in, we took that advice on board. The next day we probably played our best day of cricket for the whole season, and we subsequently, a week later, went on to win the Shield. And I think really the moral of the story is that, you know, I think as a leader, I think you've got to know when to step in and take the lead, and when it's appropriate to step back. And John, in that situation, clearly took the lead and had 12 guys busy following him.
John, I'm going to follow what Paul and Oscar have just asked you and contributed with a question of my own. Working with 29 franchise leaders in my business, I find that a lot of people have risen through the ranks without much leadership training, or really, really quickly. You know, they've grown their business really, really quickly, and then all of a sudden they have a team of 25. Do you have any tips for those business owners out there that have done it from the trenches, and they now find themselves responsible for a large amount of people, and how to know, you know, flex that muscle and build that muscle on the leadership aspect?
Yeah, look, not an easy task, because what they've brought to that leadership role is obviously a real deep knowledge of the business. That's why it's successful, and they've had very much a hands-on role in doing that. But as Jacko was just pointing out, I think leaders have to have trust in their troops. They need to clearly identify who within their staff or their business team are very good disciples, if you like. Maybe very good people delivering in their own way the same principles and values and messages that maybe the coach would. But what the coach has to do is to have faith and trust in those people, so that they can get on and do that. Again, it's a little bit like, therefore, the coach or the leader or the business manager, your franchise business managers, can begin to step back, and if things are not going quite right, then they need to come back and realign. But really, I think trying to work out in their businesses, if they were gone tomorrow, you know, if something happened to them tomorrow, they certainly don't want to lose their franchise, but they needed to really keep ticking over who is the person or persons that can step up into some of the roles and keep the business ticking. So it's going to be, I think, really important to quickly identify those people, give them the opportunity, so that the franchise owner really then begins to be a little bit more strategic. And to do that, that means they've got to step back away from the business and allow other people to get on and do it.
Absolutely. So basically, just to recap on what you've just said, is it starts, you know, in the early days from recruitment, but having that vision all sort of down the track of succession planning, really, isn't it?
It is. You know, you mentioned vision, critical. You've got to know where you want to go, where you want to take your franchise. And if you know that, then that begins to tell you a lot about the type of people that you want within your franchise. And that is about recruitment, as you say. I mean, not everybody in business necessarily gets the opportunity to recruit. You end up with a group of people that are given to you, and you have to work with them. But where you do have that opportunity as a franchise owner to recruit, it's critical to get the right sort of mix of people, and it's a whole mix that you're looking for. And therefore, yeah, you can begin the succession planning, if you like, as you go through the business of training, educating your staff.
Absolutely. And thank you for answering that, because I've invited quite a few franchises to watch this tonight, so hopefully that's helped them out. Now, Greg, I'm going to flick over to you now, because you came in just after we started. So would you like to introduce yourself and tell us your history, a little bit of your history with John, along with any questions that you would like to ask him?
Sure. Thanks, Emma. Apologies for my late inclusion. So is it appropriate, just a very short resume of my... yeah, okay. So I'm a lawyer. Business succession is really my specialty, I suppose, a commercial lawyer these days. My involvement with John was really from 1994. I was playing cricket, obviously, in Queensland, and prior to that I'd played a little bit in Sydney and a bit of shield cricket for New South Wales, and I was probably generally considered a sort of a middle-aged player when I sort of came to my involvement with John. So I probably wasn't a player at the end of my career, but I played a little bit. and I'd had a few things which had worked okay for me probably in my cricket at that stage, but I was not really dominating at that level. I was, probably was considered sort of a battling player at Shield level, sort of holding my own, but not a sort of a star player. And the things that had worked for me up to that stage were probably just a lot of effort and a lot of energy, and I used to work quite physically hard. Probably the thing I sort of changed with my involvement was John, as he was a lot more structured, and I probably thought of myself as a structured person, that I would have a game plan and stick to it. But the truth be known, I think I probably had a tendency in the heat of the moment and the heat of battle probably to throw it all out the window and just go with a lot of energy and a lot of aggression and a lot of sort of effort. Now, I think what John really brought to it is he would stop me and say, listen, we had a discussion in the lead up to the game or in the preparation, and these are the things that we said we were going to do. And he would just firmly but gently question whether I was in fact doing those. And that's not to say I wasn't. If I was, he would say, this is what you said you were going to do and you're doing it, and you could see it in the performance. Or alternatively, and a few examples come to mind, but he would say, well, this is what we talked about doing and this is what in fact you're doing. And he always had data. He always had some data on where we were bowling or what we were doing. And that was probably really important to me because it taught me a lot about myself. In fact, even though you might think you've got a plan and you're sticking to it, in the heat of battle or in the moment, often, in fact, I wasn't. So that was an important change for my game, and it's probably something I learned from John. I probably should have learned it sooner, but it was not in my nature, but I like to think it's something I picked up from him. So that was from 94 through to I probably finished up about 99, but I still had involvement in the game, and cricket being the game that it is, you still run into the same people even when you finish Shield cricket. So John and I have kept in touch. Is it appropriate at this stage for a question for John, or do you want more on my business background?
No, perfect. Question for John. John is perfect timing.
Well, it's almost running off what Oscar had to say, actually. I'm not sure what I had for John, but I like what Oscar had to say. You talked about infusion and invoking. I suppose since cricket, I've had involvement in a few organisations, certainly cricket administration, a little bit of politics, working with councillors and people quite ambitious at an individual level. I was in a policy development role with an industry group, which sort of seemed to morph pretty quickly into running for Lord Mayor of Brisbane in 2008, and you had to work with a whole lot of people that were looking to get elected in their wards, but also had to sort of work as part of a team. And but also, I suppose, in cricket administration, I've always been interested. I think with our group, with the Queensland Bulls, it was a very quantifiable sort of outcome. When there was winning, there was losing, there was data, there was statistics, and we were very tuned into if someone wasn't playing a team game or if they weren't playing, sort of a collectively putting the team first. But my experience, I suppose, in business and perhaps individually, is it's not as simple as that. And I'd just be interested, building on what Oscar had to say, how do you read an organisation and the people into it? At what point do you just demand what you deem to be the requirements for success, or do you lose them by doing that? I mean, is that really a shortcut which sets you up for failure if you simply say, this is how it's going to be, or do you impose yourself? And I'd just be interested. John, certainly, I think he was much more of the infusion as a cricket coach, but I just wonder if his experience with coaching, whether he thinks that perhaps you have to have a softer touch in the workplace.
Yeah, good question, Greg. Look, again, I think part of the answer there is going back to maybe the franchise notion that Emma brought up. It is partly about recruitment, and it is also partly about you understanding yourself. So if I use an example going back into our cricket teams, as Jacko mentioned, I wasn't really a person that wanted to be directive. I wanted individuals to be problem solvers, and I wanted them to have the opportunity to do that. So I wasn't really that overbearing style of person, yet I think when you lead, when you're in a position of leadership, you actually move through a whole range of different styles. So sometimes it's leading, which is what we've been talking about, I think, trying to create environments and allow people to grow with you in the background. But having set the vision and knowing people are going that direction. Other times it's management. So there are some individuals or some situations or some groups who need strict management. So you kind of mentioned it yourself there a little bit, that what we do with some individuals is to try to put some framework around them, some structure around them, and you know, given that structure, they're going to perform exceptionally well. And then hopefully they'll understand a little bit more about themselves and a little bit more about the process of being successful if things are a little bit more structured and they can begin to control that themselves. Other times it's about following. You know, that there are incredible people within your organisation or within your team that have great skills at certain times, in certain moments, in certain situations. So let them have their head and be a follower. Give them every possible support. Other times it's about serving, you know. And I guess from my point of view, that's where I tended to operate quite a bit. It was, in my opinion, my role was to serve the team. It was to serve the individuals. It was to serve cricket and try to ensure that individual team or cricket would benefit from whatever we could produce as a group or for the individual. So to do that and to enable you to do that, I think it's around about that recruitment. It's therefore that old saying about the right people. For me, the right people then are different people. So within our Queensland cricket environment, you might remember a guy by the name of Bennett King. You know, I found him to be an exceptionally good assistant coach because he complemented my style. He was quite an extrovert, if you like, in a sense, at least by way of voice and by way of direction. And that's the same around the various teams that I've been involved with, trying to find the right people and the right mix and the differences so that in situations where my own value set or my own philosophies or my own principles didn't necessarily, not necessarily allow me to intervene, but didn't necessarily give me the skill set to intervene, then I needed to know that I had other people who could do that. And so I guess I think it would be very difficult for somebody to constantly move between infusing and invoking. Jacko mentioned the example where, you know, in Tasmania, it jumped in for a short period of time, but I found that very uncomfortable. And as Jacko and those who were there could recall, I mean, I could only do that for about 10 minutes. That was about as far as I could go. So I think it is definitely knowing where you're best suited and in what roles you're best suited, then complement that with other people around you. So whether that's a volunteer organisation, whether it's in a legal firm, whether it's in a franchise, it is about trying to find those right people, and those right people then become your disciples. They will deliver your message and your value sets and your philosophies in their own way, in their own time, which is great because it's seen by the rest, the masses, to be not you but somebody else saying the same stuff but in different words and in different ways. So finding those people, giving them the authority to undertake an authority in inverted commas, doesn't mean they have to have any formal role, but giving them that authority and that support to be who they are and deliver what they want, because you know that they're basically on the same track as you. Don't know, that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that's partly in answer to what you said or what you asked.
Absolutely. So it just reinforces what you said at the beginning, John, was that, again, it comes back to always knowing yourself first, which Oscar has something to contribute to this question as well.
Yeah, Greg, I thought it was a great question. It reminded me of an interview I once heard with Heston Blumenthal, a very famous celebrity chef who are all renowned for yelling at people, but one of the things he reflected on in his early career as a head chef, where it's a very high-pressure environment where you've got to deliver consistently, and a lot of the things that happen in sport happen in those kitchens. He was a failure in his first couple of years, and someone took him aside and basically said, do you understand the role you are playing as a leader in creating the environment for the failure of your team? And from that point on, he never yelled at his staff once. And every time he wanted to go and correct somebody, he stopped first to think about what role he had played in creating the situation that he found that staff member in, and what could he do to improve that before he gave him corrective feedback. So again, I think it's back to the leader's got to know where their strength is. But I was surprised, because I would have thought in a kitchen it's all about yelling, and his kitchen's renowned for being quite quiet, and it's all about the preparation and the setup and the team knowing its roles. So he's never shouted since then, and you know, he's booked out for 3 years in advance, so I think he's got a clue how he's going about that.
Excellent. I love this. Yeah, you're right, John.
I might just say, and what I'll do is make sure I forward it on to everybody. But there's a great TED video, 16-minute video, on conductors of orchestras, and basically the various leadership styles that they exhibit to get this performance of their big orchestra. And I just can't quite recall the name of the chap that walks everybody through it, but it's a really, really good insight, a bit like Oscar's talking about the chefs in the kitchen. This is the same sort of expose, I guess, on leadership styles, but from a conductor of an orchestra. So I'll pop that link through, and we'll make sure we get that out to everybody.
Excellent, absolutely. We can actually pop it into the sidebar after this event, if you like, John. So it's there for everyone, even if they're watching post. You know what I love about this is that we're talking base strategies for leadership, but that it can be applied across so many different modalities. Like it can be applied to the orchestra, it can be applied to the kitchen, it can be applied to cricket, and it can be applied to business. So it's obviously things that work across the board. Now, Adam, I'm going to get you to unmute yourself now and tell us a little bit about your history with John and ask him your question.
I suppose, well, I talked a little bit earlier about my history with John. The one thing I liked about Bucks, he had a great ability of bringing people together from different areas, i.e. people like an Andrew Simons was different to a Jeff Foley, was different to a Wade Seckham or a Paul Jackson. And for me, as an individual, one of the lessons that I've learnt through being involved with John and then taking it into my work life is that everyone's a bit different, and you've got to then have the ability to try to bring them together, and that's something as a manager you're always trying to do, because that gives you, if you can get those people working together, you can get great outcomes. So my question to Buck was, what did you do? I know we had some profiling and we had some other sort of resources at our disposal to identify people's different traits, but what advice would you give to a manager that doesn't have those at their disposal, and now identifying those strengths and weaknesses in individuals, and how do you bring them together to achieve the outcome you want?
Great question.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, thanks, Adam. Look, well, the simple answer is you just got to get to know your people. That's a simple answer, whether you've got profiles, tools, or whatever. But I don't know whether you can recall, but really I was interested in Adam Dale or Greg Rowell or Paul Jackson or Jeff Foley as a person, not necessarily the cricketer. So at the beginning of seasons or at the end of seasons, but generally at the beginning of season, I think I'll try to sit down with most and just go through an interview about, well, what are your goals? You know, what are your personal goals? What are your career goals? What are your family goals? You know, and a whole range of things that I felt would help me to get to know that person better. And when you operate with a group of people on a daily basis, then you do get to the opportunity to spend time with them. You also get the opportunity to spend time with their families. You know, we'd often have family barbecues or various events that we'd all come together as a rather large family. So it was in those various events that I was able to, in most cases, get to know individuals better. I mean, I think, again, my wife Judith was very instrumental in helping me do that because she'd be part of the events. You know, with young children around, she would be mixing with the partners of the athletes, and she would give me some insights, further insights into either that family, the partner, or indeed the athlete. So the simple answer is, we've got to get to know people. I just find in business these days that there's a lot of lip service paid to that. Everybody says they're too busy. They're caught up, and going back to this notion of switching in and switching out. It's so important whether you've got 5 seconds or 5 hours with somebody, that right at that moment you've got to give 100% attention to that person. Because again, often it's not necessarily what they're saying, it may in fact be what they're not saying, or it may in fact be the way that they're saying it, or how they're saying it, or the look in their face. And so as a manager or a leader with a group of people, it's so important that you've got to put time into knowing your people. Because again, as our early discussions were saying, if we want them to be their own best coach and we want to be able to be invisible, or we want to be redundant as leaders and coaches, well, we've got to know them. We've got to actually know them and understand where they're at, and spend time giving them good feedback in an informal sense. So again, I think in the world of business, we talk about the chef in the kitchen. There's absolutely many instances, I would have thought, where there's plenty of really good coaching opportunities on an informal basis. Then at the end of the evening, maybe, or sometime through the week, maybe there's the formal coaching opportunity where they'd sit down and talk about, who knows, a recipe, or a certain way of serving something, or a certain way of dealing with issues that might arise in the kitchen. So simple answer is, got to get to know people as much as we can. And of course, it will always depend upon the individual how much they want to let you into their lives.
Absolutely. So if time's your biggest ally with those people. Adam, did you have any follow-up questions for that?
No, John, it's be great to hear from Jeff and Greg on their parts, because certainly John also had a great ability of maximising the most out of individuals, and that in my cricket world I was not a fast bowler. I was an opening bowler, of course, and bowled with the other fast bowlers, but my pace wasn't my strength. So, but what Buck made me do was realise what I could and couldn't do, and I think that that gave me the ability to achieve my outcomes at cricket and maximise my output. And I know that when working with my team, it's about trying to look at strengths and weaknesses and trying to explore both and improve both, but it's also about getting them to be as good as they can at the things they're very good at.
Absolutely. So Adam just asked if Greg or Jeff had any input into that. Greg or Jeff, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I will. Following on from what Adam said then, one thing I was always struck me with Buck's coaching was that he was employed as a coach of cricket, and yet he actually I can't ever remember him actually teaching me anything about cricket, the game that is. Quite interestingly, he was, I think he alluded to before, he was more interested in me as a person, and if he could create an environment where my personal life or my work life was stable and helped me create that, really my cricket took care of itself. He didn't get too involved in the technical side of things. So from that perspective, I think, I think from my workplace anyway, I think that's a lesson, in the financial world, we tend to get very tied up in the technical side and lose sight of the person. And just in the organisations I've worked for, the best organisation I worked for, interestingly, was very much focused on the person rather than getting over technical with in terms of the financial industry. So I think that can be applied right across the board, as John was saying. He was interested in the person and what made them tick, and that was very powerful for me. So yeah.
Absolutely. Greg, did you have any comments on this?
Yeah, probably just some observations on what Paul Jackson had to say. I noted his anecdote of John's, rather confronting presentation to the dressing room at in Hobart at the end of the 94-5 season. One of the takeouts, I wasn't there at that time, but I do remember John's first address to the Queensland Bulls was we were over in the what was then the Bears dressing rooms on the other side of the ground, and there was this sort of some sort of amphitheatre, and he presented for the first time to the whole squad. And I do remember in that presentation there was a mood of I'm a reasonable guy, but don't mess with me. And I think he did set that down in his first address, which a lot of people have since forgotten. It's just interesting in light of Paul's address, Paul's anecdote, that my memory of John is that he did sort of say, listen, I'm a reasonable person, but, and I don't want to defame John here in the presentation, but there was a sense of, this is the way we're going to go about it, and I'll give you a lot of trust, but if you do the wrong thing, there will be consequences. And he may not even remember that, but I remember thinking there was a firmness about him, notwithstanding he was definitely a thinking man, a man of education and analysis, but there was a firmness to it that he just gave you that gentle warning, this is the way it's going to be. And I guess that builds on, I'm just fascinated on how you bring the best out of people, because there does have to be consequences. And what was interesting is that for the entire rest of the season, I never really saw that side of him, although I was did link up with the team after they returned from Tasmania. I think I was injured for that game, and that was the key anecdote that came out of that trip. So it was very clear that he had stepped up at the start, just a suggestion of it, and a moment of authority at the end, and everything in between was about imagination and believing in people. And that was very much a feature, I think, of sides that John coached, and certainly in the Australian side there was a huge amount of talent and things available. But in those Shield sides, what was really clear was that he really got the most out of all the squad. And I think previously there'd been a bit of a focus that we would look to a couple of really key people with great sets of skills that would then win the game, and of course that was never really going to be enough. Now, he really got the golden threads and weaved them together into something much more powerful. And if you look at, Adam Dale, Test cricket, Jeff Foley, Australia A, a long Shield career, Paul Jackson, a long Shield career, he really got a lot out of it. And I certainly felt my own game went to another level after my involvement with John, and I think most players from our era would suggest the same. So I think that's just consistent. There was just a hard edge about him, but the rest was all analysis and just bringing together the best that he could see. And that's, I suppose, consistent with his observations tonight about getting to know you and really wanting to see what made you tick, because he really wanted that sort of, 70, 80, 90% and above out of you, rather than, 2 or 3 people having a big season and then, perhaps the others sort of flounder.
Absolutely. I'm just going to throw the ball from Greg to Paul here. Paul, did you have a question that you wanted to ask John tonight?
Yes, I do, Emma, and I just want to premise, because I think a lot of the guys have covered some of the things with John, but I just, in some of the conversation, I wanted to drag out something that I always felt about John's leadership. One was his ability to be able to, I think Adam's touched on this, his ability to set a vision and then actually get people to buy into that vision. That's actually really quite a unique skill, and I think in a lot of us in our business life have to do that. I certainly have to do it in my current role. And then also with the detailed planning as to actually how you execute that and how you actually deliver results on that. And that was something that John really do. And one of the other characteristics of John's leadership is that he's prepared to think differently. And I'll go back to, again, in the first year that he was coach of Queensland, he decided, with the help of some technical people, to develop computerisation of cricket, and he would record how the game was going and be able to provide computer feedback to all of the players. At the time, he was roundly criticised for taking that particular stance, and yet here we are today, sort of some 20 years on, and basically every team has computerised forms of analysis, and all the players have in-depth details that are going on. In a way, John was a pioneer in that particular thing. And I think if you want to grab your competitive edge, you need to be able to have a good vision for the future and to how you can do it differently to what your competitors can do. My question for John is 3 in 1, and you probably wouldn't be surprised that I asked you 3 questions, John. What's the process for setting up a team for success, and how do you involve consistency within that team? And thirdly, how important is feedback in that in delivering results?
Right. Well, that wraps up the night, Jacko. So firstly, look, firstly the team, I suppose, again, to answer relatively quickly, I think 5 pieces of the framework, lots of other things that go into it, but firstly there is the vision and the overarching strategies that are going to take you to the vision. So again, for me, the vision has always been about being ahead of the game, trying to change the game. In a sense, why play the same game as everybody else? Why not actually try to give you, as you're saying, that competitive advantage? So always trying to scan the horizons and look for what that might be. And therefore, if we've got a handle on that, then what are the key strategies that are going to get us there? So that's one. Then it's around, we talked about the leadership culture. So leadership culture, about the leader. Leaders have got to walk the walk, talk the talk. They can't do one thing and ask others in their organisation something else. So walk the walk. Talking about, again, everybody should be a leader, so we really want everybody to be their own best coach, so you know that they're going to make good decisions on your behalf, irrespective of where they fit within an organisation. So, as you mentioned, lots of data, lots of analysis, but in the end, Greg's a fast bowler and he's at the top of his mark, and it doesn't really matter how well planned we are, how much knowledge we know of the batsman at the other end, the game situation. At that moment, right at that one moment, we want Greg to make a good decision about the type of ball he's going to deliver, what's required at the moment. Execution then is another issue, but firstly, let's make a good decision. So we want everybody to lead. And then, of course, you mentioned, Jacko, computers and so on. It's about looking at all your systems and processes, same sort of thing. You're trying to get them to the leading edge. So you mentioned feedback. For me, one of the interesting things at the moment that I'm exploring in my business is just around performance management and performance measurement. So most of us all know that we undertake a whole set of performance appraisals through the course of the year to give an understanding of how an individual is performing in their various roles throughout the course of that year. Generally, they're done every 6 months, probably more around the 12 months. And it just seems to me that's a ludicrous system, absolutely antiquated and archaic, I would have thought. Yet, making it even worse, most organisations then tie their remuneration or bonus system into that. So in other words, really, over 12 months, how the hell are you actually going to give everybody really good, insightful feedback? Very difficult. So the whole feedback system in sport is based around virtually daily. Athletes, coaches, support staff, everybody is getting feedback daily, whether that's informal or formal feedback. And I think that's where business could really make a massive step into the future in terms of changing their game and being in front of the pack. Learning environment, we talked about that. We want to create a place where there's a culture that enables everybody to have input, to be challenged, to learn how to grow, to learn how to make, well, not to learn how to make mistakes, but make mistakes and how to learn from those, and then really how to build on successes. And so individually be your own best coach, but as a team, what makes us successful, and how do we actually be better at it and deliver that more regularly? Then it's about skills, as we said. We've talked about recruitment beforehand. If we're going to chase down a vision, one of the key means to do that is getting the right people in that team. And then, as I've just talked about, success measures. How do we measure performance? So with all that background, Jacko, the role of the coach then is about delivering that and sticking with that. I think that's so crucial, that we often find, I think, because something's not working today, well, let's change it and let's find something else. Well, unless there's an absolutely dynamic reason why there is a need for change, if we set something up in the first place, we've got good vision, we understand the strategy, we're measuring our tracking our way towards that. Well, let's continue to stick with those plans and provide that feedback individually and collectively as we go along. So in a sense, it's a bit of a combination to your three questions, I hope.
You know, I think if I could perhaps just follow on from that, I think in my own personal experience, John, I think Jeff made the point that I don't think you could actually, you were never a technical spin bowler like I was, but I think in a lot of ways you gave me a lot of feedback about my actual game and also how I fitted into the team, and probably also gave me the encouragement to pursue what I was trying to pursue and believe in myself. So I think all of those sorts of things helped my game throughout what and to make me a better player and actually also contribute strongly to the team.
Excellent. Well, we are almost finished for tonight, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. If anyone, actually we will go through the panel if you have any last comments. So Adam, we'll start with you.
No, I think John's covered it very well. Those great strengths that he has have come through, but he, again, just to reiterate, he had a great ability to bring all different types of people together, and then have them able to achieve the outcomes they wanted to. But along the way, enjoy it. And I think one of the things we did as a Queensland environment is we enjoyed our sport. And to what Jeff said before, I remember sitting down to an end-of-season review with John, and we just had our first child. I just changed jobs, bought a house, and I think went for an hour, and 58 minutes of it were all things bar cricket, and there was 2 minutes about my outswinger. So Buck knew how to pick and choose the right types of conversations, and in my world, is someone very important, and he's very successful at bringing the best out of people and taking people forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Adam. We really appreciate it.
No problem at all.
Thanks, Jeff.
Excellent. Jeff, if you'd like to join us now.
Yeah. No, I think pretty much covered. I mean, from my perspective, John certainly changed the way I thought about cricket and my life in that respect. So, he gave me a way forward, and he took me from a club cricketer and gave me the tools to go to the next level. And as I said before, it didn't give me any tools in terms of cricket, but just in terms of my belief in myself. So, and taking the time to understand me as a person. And I think one of the things I probably didn't mention before, but I sort of just quickly I was involved in the period before John took over coach of Queensland, and obviously pretty heavily involved when he was. But one of the things big differences was that he got everyone pointing in the right direction. And the most important thing he did, he made the weakest link in the team able to find a place. And in the workspace, I think that's very important as well. So, and I think I probably was close to the weakest link. So that's why it was pretty important.
Very harsh, Coles, very harsh.
Pretty true. So no, but yeah, no. Thanks for having me in tonight, and been very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Greg, your turn now.
Oh, look, probably mirror those comments. Look, it was, you get to a stage, I don't know, you're in your mid-20s and you think you know it all, and then you come across people that, just make you look at it a bit differently, and I think that's what John did. He just had imagination, was happy to come at it from a different angle, and I think, whether that's sport or whether it's the law, professional services, whether it's in a kitchen, it's a really important thing to take a fresh look at it and slow it down. We're all throwing a lot of energy at it now with all this technology here. I was ripping my hair out for the technology a moment ago. Things are pretty fast, and I think it's good to have people to just slow you down and say, what is it that you're trying to do? And that's about being smart enough to make good decisions, and John talked about that before. At the top of your mark is you're going to make a good decision, and then there's the execution. And I think then just feedback, take the time to say, okay, am I actually doing what I said I was going to do? And that was what I really took from John, you know, from my involvement in his cricket, and I think, you know, what I've tried to do, varying degrees of success in other areas since.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Greg. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, Paul, your turn.
Well, look, I think I've covered it reasonably well. I think, you know, obviously lots of cricket, because 4 of the panel here, we all played a lot of cricket together and under John. So I think, for mine, I think that some of the lessons that John taught us, we were very fortunate to have him as coach, and I've certainly taken a lot of the stuff that John's done into my working environment. You know, work can quite often be a lot more opaque than the dressing room, but I think ultimately you've got to go back to those principles, and they stand the test of time. And certainly that's the mark he's left with me, and I try to take those principles into what I do, into my work life, and I think they're very, very valid, and I think they'll continue to be very valid.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Paul.
Thank you.
Oscar,
thanks.
Oscar, what are your thoughts on this? And we are expecting a brilliant article from you after this to match your previous one. What do you think, John?
Yes, I agree, Em.
Excellent.
So with whether it's sport or business, we use a lot of competitive and life and death metaphors. But for everybody on the audience tonight, it is November the 11th, and I think we should remember people have made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms we enjoy, and sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously, and today's a good day to remember that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that poignant reminder. And for joining us tonight, Oscar, thank you very much. Now, before I hand over to John for his last comments, I have taken a page full of notes tonight. So thank you so much to John and the panel. Just a bit of a recap, if you like. Culture is really important. Businesses to give daily feedback is really important. Preparation, which is preparation, which means the result will take care of itself. The cornerstone of coaching is understanding yourself first, which is super important. Coaching is very simply like parenting, which I thought was a great analogy. Yeah, and we'll include that on John's blog tomorrow. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. John, last comments from you.
Thanks, Em. Look, firstly, thank you to all the panel. Fantastic to have you all involved this evening. And to you, Oscar, as part of the panel. Tremendous to have you on as well, and couldn't really agree more that, you know, in a sense, we all do take ourselves a little bit too seriously sometimes, and it is always nice to keep life in perspective, and days like today, or the 11th hour of the 11th month is, as you say, a very poignant reminder of maybe bigger pictures, and for all of us not to get too hung up and too caught up in our daily lives. Just do the best we possibly can, and then look forward to tomorrow with a big smile. So I'm having a big smile, having been associated with everybody here again this evening. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you are watching this not live, then please click on the button below and you'll be able to download your 12 free tips on how to produce winning teams. Until next time, thank you very much, and thank you, everyone, for watching and contributing tonight.
Well done, Emma. Thank you.